just wanted to quickly introduce ourselves. We have got quite a short period of time. So I'm Rachel Collins. That's the last name. I'm the head of procurement for Faithful+Gould, which is part of SNC-Lavalin, which is a global business for engineering, procurement and construction. I'm joined by my colleague today as well, who can introduce herself in a moment. We're really excited to be here and really passionate about diversity and inclusion across our organisation. So thank you to the organisers, thank you to everybody being here this morning. And I think I'd just echo some of the key messages that have been coming out from the sessions that have already taken place. And to be honest, I'd jump on the back of Joe's comments around the title, but also if we're going to have another one of these, can I have one in Saudi as well, please? But I'll touch on that a little bit later on. I'll pass over to my colleague now for introduction.
Thanks, Rachel. So I'm Clare Evans. I'm a project manager and business change leader at Atkins, which is part of the SNC-Lavalin group. I also have the honour of being the network chair for our Diversity and Inclusion Business Network. So our D&I network is a voluntary group of people who come together and work with HR, recruitment and comms to make real changes in our organisation. I'm also a mother of a 2-year-old, a wife, pregnant with my second child, and I'm an I Am Remarkable facilitator, which I'll touch on later as well. So Rachel and I are here to talk to you about fostering women's empowerment in the construction industry. And I'm going to start with a bit about what diversity and inclusion is and why we should focus on it and some of the first steps you can take. And then Rachel will take you through her experiences as a senior leader, as a woman in Saudi Arabia. Yeah, there we go. So let's start with what is diversity and inclusion. And I think you've heard a little bit along the way from Lara and from the panellists. But diversity is really the mix of dimensions and characteristics, values and beliefs and backgrounds and preferences of individuals. So having people from all of those different places. And a diverse workforce has a variety of genders, religious beliefs, ethnic backgrounds, ages, physical disabilities. It's about everyone being unique and bringing their own self. So as Lara said earlier, it's being yourself and being able to be yourself in an organisation. But diversity alone is not enough. We need, together with that, inclusion. Because inclusion is about us feeling part of something. It's about feeling valued, supported, treated fairly and equally respected. And Joe said in his panel about a state of belonging. So if people don't feel like they belong, they're not going to bring their best to a workplace. If we have diversity without inclusion, we have lots of different people, a breadth of experiences, but they're not feeling part of something. And if we have inclusion without diversity, then we've got lots of people feeling like they're working together, they're really engaged, but they're all the same. They come from the same backgrounds and they're bringing the same beliefs. So having both gives us an environment which fosters well-being, facilitates collaboration, and really increases engagement. So at SNC-Lavalin, we believe it's important because it actually embodies our values of collaboration, but it's also important to the bottom line. There's a number of statistics that show that it's not just morally the right thing to do, but having a diverse and inclusive workforce also brings us competitive advantage. So you can see some stats on the screen at the moment that highlight this. So looking at sales growth, companies with higher numbers of females in their organisation have better growth. Looking at new markets, you're more likely to expand into new markets and to get a greater share of market growth in the markets you're already in if you have a diverse workforce. And when we're looking at overall financial performance, we often see that companies that have a diverse and inclusive culture, have a commitment to diversity and inclusion, and also have higher rates of diversity and inclusion, have better returns. So when we look at what we can do, there's actually some great global support for bringing people together, and there's some great local support for this as well. As Lara touched on, it's hard to get statistics of the construction industry, but a recent report did show that 13% of women, 13% of the engineering industry in the UK was women. And in the USA, 34% of females are at entry level, but only 18% are reaching the C-suite. So we're obviously seeing that drop out, and we need to do something about it. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was adopted by all the United Nations member states in 2015, and has at its heart 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And they've actually highlighted that we will not be able to complete these Sustainable Development Goals without gender equality. So Sustainable Development Goal number 5 focuses on gender equality and wants the world to achieve this gender equality and empowering the women and girls. And so how do we actually implement Sustainable Development Goal number 5? Well, UN Women and UN Global Compacts have come together and created the Women's Empowerment Principles. And these are 7 simple principles that organisations can work towards to actually change the empowerment of women in your organisation. There's a website, weprinciples.org, and you can go there to find out about the Women Empowerment Principles. It's a really simple step that your organisation can take as a first step to sign up and commit to these principles. And there's also an analysis toolkit online where you can go online, find out how you're doing now against these 7 principles and put in place an action plan for the next year, 2 or 3 years to actually achieve some great improvements. Women's empowerment is the greatest opportunity of our time. Statistics indicate that if women played the same role in the labour market as men, $28 trillion would be added to the global annual economy by 2025. So in the UAE, the government is really leading the way. They've created the Gender Balance Council in 2015, and they have an objective of reducing the gender gap across government sectors, as well as promoting the UAE's status as a benchmark for gender balance legislation. The UAE actually wants to become one of the top 25 countries in the world for gender equality by 2021. So you can also look at the Gender Balance Guide and take some really good key first steps as to what you can do to move your company forward in terms of gender equality. In SNC-Lavalin, we recently held an event where we brought together companies from the construction industry to sign the Women's Empowerment Principles with us and hold a panel discussion. And we had 6 organisations from the region sign up in the last few months to the Women's Empowerment Principles. And I just encourage you all to have a look at those principles for your organisation and see if it's something that you can do and put in place an action plan for today. So what actually can we do, as well as signing the principles and reading the Gender Balance Guide? What are some real key initiatives that you can kickstart today? Some of these things can be done by management and need senior support in terms of changing policies, but actually everything can be started at a grassroots level. You can build a diversity and inclusion business network, you can get together with other colleagues who feel passionately about some of these topics and put together proposals that you take to your management in terms of making change. All the changes that have happened in Atkins and SNC-Lavalin have been driven by our volunteer networks from the grassroots up. So we were unhappy about our maternity policy, put together a proposal, and we now have 14 weeks paid maternity leave, plus the additional 6 months optional unpaid, as well as keeping in touch days which are paid throughout the unpaid period, and a support scheme for mothers who return to work. So there's little steps that can be taken in terms of putting together proposals. And we're actually working on a paternity proposal at the moment and hoping to get a week or 2 weeks for all the men in our organisation who become new dads. I'm not going to go through every single one of these because I think we're sort of running short of time and some of them have been mentioned before, but I just want to highlight a few. So having a gender pay analysis is really important to know where you stand. And although some countries are now legislating this, like the UK, what they're doing is actually not giving us true results. So a gender equality pay analysis will look at how women are paid compared to men in the whole organisation. And so, as Yasmin from RICS mentioned earlier, if you have a higher number of men in senior positions, you're going to have a gender pay gap. That's not looking at are people paid equally for the job that they do. So what we're planning on doing is an equal pay analysis, taking somebody of one role with the same role at the same grade for male and female and saying, are they paid the same? And if not, putting an action plan in to correct that. We've talked a little bit about recruitment strategy and also unconscious bias training. We're going to be implementing unconscious bias training for all of our employees across the organisation. All of us have biases. There's nothing we can do to to sort of be created without those biases, but what we can do is become conscious of them and to become aware of where we're acting in a way that may not be fair to everybody that we're dealing with. So that unconscious bias training is really, really important for hiring managers in the recruitment process, but it's also important for all of our staff in the way that they treat everybody around them. So that's a key initiative that you can also put in place. Having gender balanced interview panels so that when people are being employed by your company, if they are a female, that they have a female on the panel and they feel more comfortable with that. Or also having females on panels that are interviewing men, just to give that different perspective. Here we're focusing quite a lot on gender because we're at the Women in Construction event, but it really is about diversity as well. And so having a diverse, balanced interview panel in terms of nationality as well is really important. And flexible working policies. I mean, I wouldn't be here with you today if we didn't have a flexible working policy. I managed to work from home some days. I managed to go home, spend dinner and bath time with my 2-year-old and then log back in and work in the evening. And being able to do that has given me the opportunity to grow my career. And I think you know, that doesn't cost the business anything. I'm still doing 45 hours a week, but I'm just doing them in a way that's flexible and works for me. And that's something that as an individual in an organisation, you can also start to write a business case for and to approach your managers and to ask for that support. I'm going to leave it there. If you've got any questions on any of the other items, just come and find me afterwards. And I'll pass over to Rachel to share her experiences.
Oh, press the right button, Rachel. Okay. Oh, I think we've skipped one. Okay, thank you very much. I think great introduction for me. Thank you, Claire. Wanted to start with a story, and a very quick story because I'm conscious of time. So Clare is our D&I lead for the Middle East, and I've been with the business for just over 6 months. And when I joined the business, I was asked, oh, Rachel, do you want to be involved with our D&I network? We're relaunching across the region. Yeah, of course, fantastic. What do I need to do? You need to interview. Okay, fabulous, I'll interview. How do you prepare for an interview on D&I? So did the call, and Claire and another colleague were fantastic on the call, but I was a little bit sideswiped. What does D&I mean to me? I fumbled. Claire tells me I didn't. I got the job, but actually looking back, I don't think many of us will probably have an answer on the spot, apart from Claire and a couple of others probably in front of me that have already rehearsed it. So I just wanted to kind of feed that back to you all and think, what does D&I mean to you? And I think there's been some really fabulous examples across a number of different organisations this morning. But we then moved it forward as part of that implementation of the new network and asked our staff, what does D&I mean to them? And actually, how do we start to build on that and create that culture and ethos within the business to continue to grow that network and empower people to be involved, not just women. And I think for me, it comes back to, no, it's not a tokenistic approach. Actually, it's not about women. It's about us being together as one. And that really came across in the feedback. So some of the key powerful words and reminders that came across from our staff were respect, equality, togetherness, empowerment, communication, and actually one of the biggest was one team. We all come together and we work together to deliver a diverse and inclusive environment. So just touching on my slightly different career path from Lara that started, I went the other direction. So my background is in the UK, and I spent nearly 11 years in the UK in what I thought was diverse and varied roles. A little bit different when I came to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. But I think picking up as well from what Lara said at the beginning around being bold, I wanted to change, I wanted to understand, I wanted to develop, and I was bold, very bold. And I think the amount of questions that I received around, you're going to Saudi? So I'd just like to ask for a raise of hands. How many people in the room have been to Saudi? How many people have lived there? Yeah, I thought so. It's good to see a fantastic array of hands, and I'm really pleased, and I wonder if we'd have asked that question 12 to 24 months ago, how many people would have actually raised their hand, and I think it would have been far less. I think there's huge amounts of stereotypes And actually, there's a reality versus perception issue with Saudi. And I'm not here just to promote Saudi, but I think it is really important, and link back again to the beginning keynote speaker around the huge opportunity that there really is within the environment there around the growth and diversification. But when I first got offered the role to go out to Saudi, it was, okay, let's hit Google. What does Google tell me about Saudi? What can I learn? Don't do it. It really didn't help, and it didn't help my mum when my mum Googled Saudi either. It's strict, it's unfriendly, it's closed, you need to cover up completely all the time, you can't go out with friends, you can't drive, you can't work. Okay, I'll stop. It's not like any of those things. Don't get me wrong, I'm not going to stand here and say that there isn't a long way to go for Saudi, but it is a welcoming place, it is a warm place. The people are very accommodating, particularly when I don't speak much Arabic at the moment. I am learning, but they're family orientated, and they're very progressive and passionate about their country and how they want to evolve. And really, I think for me, my personal experience is how I joined the business and moved to Saudi almost a year ago, and just as the female driving ban was being lifted. And for me, that was a huge moment in time. And I think one of the things that really spurred me on to move across, and that kind of female empowerment piece, as much as I'm not a feminist, I'm really not. Anybody that will speak to you about me will say that. But actually, I felt the need to drive. I have the opportunity to use drivers. I can use Uber. I didn't need to have a car. I can walk to work. But actually, the opportunity to take part in this government initiative, this progressive movement, was something I couldn't pass up. So I drove. I drove to site, so site worker in Saudi, and I was cheered at traffic lights. I was cheered as I entered the compound that I was working into, all by men. So they want this change and are passionate about that change in culture for women, but also about that diverse and inclusive organisational and cultural society and nationality change. So I just want to dispel a couple of the myths. I don't have to wear black. I was going to wear my abaya just to make a point. I do still wear an abaya because I want to be respectful. It's part of their culture and their history. I don't need to cover my hair. I think they're still a little bit shocked the amount of times they see bright blonde hair in an area that's not particularly seen very much. But the increasing diversity and actually being able to go out and eat in public together with girlfriends, my husband, openly, go hiking in the desert, go karting in a weekend, it is continually a more opening society. And it's all linked to something called Vision 2030. You'll have heard this in numerous different countries, but Vision 2030 in Saudi was launched in 2016. And one of the key, amongst many of the principles of what they're trying to do, is to increase female participation in the workplace from 22% to 30%. And that's just one of the key principles to try and strengthen and empower females that have only been able to work over the last 24 to 36 months. And actually they've seen, and it's included within the vision, for the growth of their GDP by 3%, just by involving more women within the workplace. So it's not just that the country is diversifying its revenue stream from oil and gas, but actually it's diversifying its culture from men-dominated to that diverse and inclusive workplace culture moving forward. And just to touch on the business, so the F&G, Atkins and SNCL business within Saudi is very strong. We have thousands of staff within the region, and it's only growing as the economy there booms. And we support, as a number of different examples from the organisations that we've touched on here, graduate programmes, getting in at STEM level to try and promote each of these design, engineering, project management roles. And actually that continuing to open up those opportunities for entrepreneurship and exponential growth that really is showcasing itself within KSA at the moment. I'm going to leave it there. I think probably if you would like to ask me anything about Saudi at the end, I'm more than happy to speak to people. I really want to get more and more people there because the opportunity is huge. But I'll open the floor up now to Q&A for me and Clare or anything around what we've spoken on. But thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you this morning.